All pretty, am I?
How could you be otherwise, darling?
Exactly.
Today I have a very special edition for you, my friends. I'm going to introduce you to my producer, Peter Ware, with whom I'm working for the last 4 years, and we recorded 2 albums with him and on the way to release number 3 country album. Pete produced 18 albums for Charlie Lansborough and for many very popular singers in UK and Ireland. So I hope you will enjoy this very special edition of my show, My Music and My Story.
Everything has a price, and the price of experience is time. When I think of all the years that it took to appreciate what's mine, sometimes I think I paid too much for the mistakes I made getting here. Everything has a price, and the cost of love is measured out in pain. But the more you give away, rest assured it will return someday again. But I don't count the cost. I gain much more than I ever lost getting here. God paid the cost for the broken and the lost on a hill far away. And for you and me today, He paid the price. Everything has a price, and hate is paid with sickness of the soul. Gotta keep my heart from that doorway to an everlasting hope. Anger sometimes roared. It had a price that I never could afford. Getting here, just getting here.
Hello everybody, my name is Larissa Tormey. I'm a singer-songwriter based in Ireland, originally from Russia, long time living here on the farm in the middle of green fields, and chatting to fabulous musicians and people who work in the music business about our lives, about our problems or no problems. And today I have a very special person. This person's name is Peter Ware. He's very talented, very amazing producer. I know for a few years now, and all my music recorded with Pete. Pete, hello. You're very welcome.
Hello there. Hello, everybody. Hi, Larissa.
Especially.
You all right?
Yes, as you see, blossoming.
Of course.
Nothing changed at all. Pete, I mean, I know we work together a lot and all of that, but like the people say every person has a story. And I'm sure you have some amount of stories you can share with us, with musicians, with other people as well, because you're very multi-talented and like big music career. Let's start from the start anyway. How did you...
If I go right back to the very start, I was envious of my brother who was learning to play the piano. He was about 9 and I was 7, and we had a piano in the house, and he started lessons. So if you really want to go back to the beginning of it, it was envy that he was beginning to start to be able to play tunes on the piano. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do that. So I got interested in the piano.
You started to get lessons then, or did you study it yourself?
Yeah, I took lessons. I was given lessons as a boy. And fairly rapidly, my brother got a lot better. But I didn't particularly. I just didn't find that the lessons really worked in quite the same way for me. He rapidly learned to read music, He rapidly learned to be able to play the piano from the music. But I went a different path. I couldn't cope with that very much. But what I could do was I could hear the music and then I could copy it. I could play it rather than read it and play it. And so I realized that he and I were different kinds of people. And eventually he passed on to other businesses, by which time the lessons gave me one thing. They gave me facility to play, taught me my scales, taught me how to move my fingers, taught me correct position on the keyboard, how to turn my fingers over so that I could run up and down scales. So in that regard, it was brilliant. But in terms of teaching me music theory or an understanding of music, didn't really work for me, if I'm honest.
No, I'd say the person you are, you're kind of more self-taught, you're very free-spirited, and you have to move on with your own pace and whatever direction you feel you have to go, isn't it, Peter?
Well, as I got older, I did keep the lessons up and got to a reasonable standard. But I was getting more and more interested in finding out things for myself. And so that was the beginning of my journey, if you like. And I'm still on the journey now, still finding out things for myself and trying things and discarding things. And over a period of years, I got to the point where I could play reasonably well, and I can hear music, I can hear the harmony, I can predict how that's going to need to be to fit a piano, which I didn't realize was unusual. I just thought everybody could do that, and it was only later on I realized that many musicians can't do that. It's only a particular mental setup of a certain group of people that can hear it and figure it out kind of organically without having to go through the stage of going, well, that's a crotchet and that's an A, so therefore this and therefore that. You can leap over that intuitively into, oh yeah, I kind of know where this is going. And sometimes it fails you, but it's more or less, it's like very much like driving. Once you kind of know where the road's likely to go, 9 times out of 10, you can guess where it's going to go. And just on the 10th time, it can catch you out. So I went off in that route. Rather than the classical route, really.
When a tear suddenly appears from your soul, let it flow, let it flow, like a river running over pebbles and stones. Let it flow, let it flow, and it will lighten your load. Why don't you be just like you used to be? How come you find so many faults with me? Somebody's changed, so let me give you a clue. Why don't you love me like you used to do? Ain't hard not loving like the hugging and the kissing in the long, long while. We don't get nearer, further, closer than a country mile. So why don't you say the things you used to say? And I shall hear the soft your tread above me, and all my dreams will warm and sweet and near. For you will bend and tell me that you love me. Should watch the children play, and every night should dream about then yours should be one day. There are angels up in heaven, guardians of our souls, and angels here amongst us to heal and make us whole. And I'll be waiting on the far side banks of Jordan. I'll be sitting drawing pictures in the sand. And when I see you coming, I will rise up with a shout and come running through the shallow waters, reaching for your hand.
Well, okay, so It's very interesting, actually, what you were telling, how it was leading you wherever you were going with the flow, something like that. So when did you decide that you were going to be a professional musician and go on the road? What age were you, or what did you start to do?
Well, I left school at 18. I'd given up music several times in that gap. And my music teacher kept entering for me for exams. So I left school with an A-level in music. There weren't many colleges and universities that would do physics and music, which were the only subjects I was any good at, together, because this was back in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. Electronic music hadn't happened.
No.
And so I started to look for jobs in careers like engineer at the BBC, that sort of thing. That's where I figured I might fit. But there weren't any jobs. England was in a mess, in a depression, and some people are old enough to remember the 3-day week and all that sort of stuff was going on. And so I couldn't get a job. So the best I did was I went and I worked in a music shop selling pianos and organs. And I carried on that through that year into Christmas time, and found that I was learning the gift of the gab too, and I could sell things as well as play them. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, well, if my life is going to be retail, that's the way I'll go. And then after Christmas, just as my job was beginning to fold up because it was a quiet time of year, mm-hmm. the other demonstrator in my shop had told me he was in a band and that they'd been asked to go abroad on a trip, very young band, and that his girlfriend didn't want him to go. And he was in a bit of a quandary about this. So when they next came in, he said, look, I don't want to go abroad. I'm too comfortable here, but you could ask this fella. So these people I didn't know at all came up to me and said, would I join a band and go abroad?
Because how old were you at that time?
I was 18, still 18 at that time.
Sorry to interrupt. So you didn't really play in a band or anything at all before, and suddenly you asked to go on the road, on the tour.
Well, I'd played in little bands in the school, and I'd even done a couple of gigs, so I was kind of getting there. Mm-hmm. But yes, it was more or less, come and rehearse tonight. If it works out, we leave in 2 weeks' time.
Wow.
It was that, and we went off, and the first trip we did was, Denmark. We toured around Denmark, and we had a residency in a fairground near Copenhagen, a place called Bakken. Mm-hmm. At the open of the season, and my first proper gig was that. And on the first day when that fairground opened, it was tradition that all the Hells Angels in Denmark would come down and visit. Now, to put this in perspective, I was the oldest in the band, so I was 18 and a half. Two of us were still 16, and the rest of us were 17 and 18. Very fresh-faced young fellas.
So it was kind of a teenage band somehow, isn't it?
Well, it was definitely an experience in growing up fast. I can tell you that. And so that was how I started in bands. Very simple.
Georgie taught us how to split, only for the hell of it. Make a phone call, take him to the station. Hey, Maurice Byner's dressed in blue. Call for Georgie for the queue. Let's arrest him, me and you, and get him out the way. Right now, Georgie, oh, you are great, mate, honestly. And I think it's very sad, all he wanted was a date, someone who could take him past the station. Maurice Byner's dressed in blue. Roll for Georgie, call me Q. Let's arrest him, me and you, and get him out the way. Oh, let's arrest him, me and you, and get him out the way. Let's arrest him, me and you, and get him out the way.
Hey! And how did you then progress into something more professional? You didn't, just to move you a little bit away from the live playing, you didn't start to do anything in the studio that time yet. It was just kind of live playing, was it?
I'd acquired one of those tape machines where you could record one channel and bounce it to another. So I could do very basic recording. And of course, as a band, we got quite good over a period of years. We got quite good as a band.
How
if I
long
can
were
say.
you with them, Pete, with that band?
Slightly different personnel, 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
We became a session band, and in the late 70s, we were hired by a lot of the big studios to go and play backing for singers
Oh,
for
wow.
albums and that sort of thing. So two things happened to me. One, I was sharpening up my abilities to play the keyboards to order, and two, I was in these wonderful, complicated, high-tech studios
Yeah.
all around London, being paid for it. And I became completely fascinated by the glowing lights and these big consoles and everything else, and decided at that point I really wanted to learn more about that. And of course, the band needed demos, and so I was the natural person to fall into that. So I gradually started to lean towards studio work.
As much as the time started to change and we got more and more into the computers, because that time even softwares was very basic, wasn't it? So as it was developing, you were developing as well, obviously. Yeah.
I'm still probably nearly 10 years before software really got going. Wow. We're talking about the huge tape machines and the desks that are 20 feet long. A very expensive business, fascinating. But even then, I wasn't confident as an engineer, and it took a long time. I worked in a lot of studios and getting more and more interested in producing other people, being hired to produce other people, and then sometimes being frustrated by the engineers, because you'll know yourself, Larissa, when you get a good engineer, they're fantastic. But when you get a bad one, it's like dragging a weight with you.
Very frustrating.
So I used to get very frustrated, and I thought, well, how hard can it be? You know, all these people I've met can do it. So I set myself the task of really learning to understand how studios worked. And from there, I built my first studio, which was called Bumper Sound, in the East India Docks in London. And that's where I started recording for myself. Okay. And that was with partners.
So how old were you when you already had that studio then? When did
I'd have been about, Bumper Sound started as a rehearsal room, became a studio when I'd be maybe 20 or 21.
Still very young. Okay. Like so from that time, Pete, in that studio, how long that studio operated anyway in that place in London?
It operated for some years, and then it morphed. It's a very complicated, long piece of history, and I'll cut to a couple of sentences. But somebody came into the studio to use it, a young fellow called Mike Stock. And he had lost a keyboard player in his band and asked me to join his band. And I was playing, I think I'd finished with the old band at that point. I was playing in a progressive rock band. And I can tell you the year, it was about 1979, because the punks were happening. The whole punk thing in the UK was going on. And suddenly my progressive rock band wasn't getting any gigs.
Right.
But nevertheless, this fellow Mike had two bands running. He had a pub band and he had what we called a function band. And the function band was all about going and playing in hotels and playing disco music for people to dance around to. And he turned out to be very interested in production, and we formed a team between the two of us, and then eventually another fellow called Matt joined us in the team. And then we moved the studio from a small 8-track where it was down to the basement of Mike's house and became a 24-track studio. Now, to those of you who aren't technical, a 24-track studio is a proper studio as against a small studio, able to do complicated and big productions.
So you were developing anyway, you were growing.
Yeah, we were growing on, and then we produced a lot of stuff, and we practiced, and we got better. And they went on and formed an alliance with a fella called Pete Waterman, and became Stock Aitken and Waterman.
All right.
In the early 80s.
And do you remember any names like that time? Anybody who actually become like big enough? Who were we working with?
I still have clients from that time. My longest running client is a lady called Hazel Dean, who had some hits in the 80s, and she still comes and visits me in the studio here, and we still do music. One of my areas that I specialize is in remaking or refinishing music to sound like it was recorded in the 80s. So I still do
it, Pete, is it? You still do it?
Yeah,
80s.
Because I was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's entirely away from the whole of the Irish and country scene or some other areas of music. It's a specialisation.
Okay.
So Hazel is still a guest at the studio and has become a lifelong friend.
How this style of music, 80s, still good following, Pete? How does that go? Just to move you.
There are record companies specialising it. Many of the artists from then are still around. I've done remixes for Sunita and Sonia and various others of that kind of stable.
Out on the street, that's where everybody meets, and it feels right. Every boy, every girl, don't have a care in the world, and it feels right. There's nothing to stop us, the rhythm is deep in our souls. The weekend is here and the nighttime is taking control. Feel the power of the nightlife. Whoa. Can you feel the power of the nightlife? Whoa. It's my life. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Girlfriend, how could you let him treat you so bad? Oh girlfriend, girl, you were the best he ever had. Baby, don't be let down. Girlfriend, how could you let him treat you so bad? Baby, don't be let down. Girlfriend, girl, you were the best he ever had. So bad. Girl, you must resist. Make this a night that's never ending. Lost in the world, got him spinning. Swept in a dance of love, just skies above. No ending, no beginning. Make this a night that's never ending. Something we're living, not pretending. They say moments can't go on, so we'll never let them go. They'll be gone.
Have been obstacles that hindered my road, but nobody said this was gonna be easy. A blues Avenue road keeps passing out, cherry loads, but I'll give 'em my life, and I'm living to be sanctified. So when the mountains seem big and faith blows small, God carry me through. We can keep on.
At that time you were working you continue to work in the studio. Can you tell me, was it just few particular styles of music, or were you working in all different styles? What were your predominant style of music? What were you in?
Okay. I was mainly in pop music at that point. But then when I came out of the Stock Aitken Waterman situation, it's a complicated story, I formed an alliance with a friend of mine who is an Indian guy called Deepak Gazanchi. And I'd done some keyboard sessions from him before.
Okay.
And I built a studio with him. It does take a funny turn, this story. I built a studio with him called Arishma in central London. And he was very open-minded in that he was an Indian guy, Indian background, but he'd lived in South Africa. And then eventually come to here after Idi Amin chucked out all of the Indians in the 70s. He had a British passport. He came to live in England. When I first met him, and I met him doing studio sessions, he was playing in a reggae band. So he was kind of open-minded to different genres of music.
Right.
So we built this studio and we started to make music for his Indian friends, which was Punjabi folk music. But because I'd been in 80s dance music, or the beginnings of what became the 80s dance scene, he and I started to make music together, and that fusion became a kind of music called bhangra, which nobody had ever heard of at the time. But it's a mixture of dance, Western dance music, which is what I was into, and Punjabi folk music, which is what he was into.
Very interesting.
And inadvertently, we started the whole thing, which became bhangra. off the back of that, just by being in the studio and trying at it.
So you're saying, people, are you saying that you actually created a style in music? Are you, two of yours, or it was there before?
Well, it sounds arrogant, but it's not meant to be. We came up with the name Bhangra, which actually is a dance, an alcohol-fueled dance, which the Punjabis used to do when bringing in the harvest. They'd have this drink called bang, which intoxicates you, and then they would dance. And the dance associated with bang was Bhangra. And so we thought this was a great name. It had good punch. So this fusion of Punjabi and Western music that we called Bhangra. We came up with the name for it, and we released the first album, which was called Bhangra Fever, in about 1986, something like that, 85 or 86. Mm-hmm. And then the name caught on with everybody else and became a regular
style of music
feature. And to this day, it's still going. Yes,
absolutely.
You'll see
Fascinating story, Pete. This. I mean, I didn't know you were actually.
Did you not know this?
No, that you were responsible for new style of music to be born between Eastern, like Western and Eastern cultures. That's absolutely amazing. Wow. I'm getting more and more impressed with you anyway, Pete.
It wasn't meant to be. It wasn't an arrogant thing. We didn't know we'd done it. We just done it because we were creative people. We were trying to come up with new ways of doing things. Yeah. And it was only after the event we realised that something had caught on to the imagination of the second generation Indian population of England, who were all in their teens and going off to university at the time, and it became their music. But we didn't know that was going to happen when we did it.
And Pete, do you still do this music? Is it still continuous, this collaboration, or what?
I haven't worked with Deepak for a number of years, although I did work with him again. But yes, I still do some music in that genre. I've just done a piece of music. I might be able to give you a snippet, which is it's Bhangra music, undoubtedly. But my Indian partner this time, Sukhpal, has mixed it with the sort of sounds of Pirates of the Caribbean, which is just absolutely out of space. So we've made this piece of music. I'll give you a clip to play for a few seconds.
Okay.
Too big? Too big. Or maybe it should be too me or not too me. गुलाबी फूल तेरे फूल पत्तियां गुलाबी फूल तेरे निकाल ले शराबी अखियां सोनिए सोनिए मिलेगी नंद लुट पुट के पट होनिए किकरा भी लंघ गई ते बेड़ियां भी लंघ गई किकरा भी लंघ गई ते बेड़ियां भी लंघ गई लंघनो आ गया फुलानी फूल बन के सोनिया दिल दे बगीचे विच यारी फूल बन के सोनिया दिल दे बगीचे विच यारी फूल बन के
So moving on, it's getting more and more interesting, I must say, by the minute, which I knew it will be. Anyway, so okay, you moved from teenage band pop music into the 80s and then into the Indian fusion music. Okay, what happened next? Bring us next.
Oh, dearie me. You're going to want to know how I got into Irish and country music, aren't you?
Yeah, that's it. I'm moving you gradually to wherever you are now.
Okay, so if we move on another few years, I eventually moved on from the studio in London. Mm-hmm. And I was by then producing Indian music on my own, not just with Deepak.
Okay.
And I'd become quite known as a producer who could do Indian music, but was up with the technology in studios. Mm-hmm. So it's quite useful to the Indian community. So eventually I got a call from a band in Birmingham who said, would I come up to Birmingham to record an album with them, a band called Achannok. I went looking for a studio and eventually found a studio in the south, Bromsgrove, just south of Birmingham, called Famous Music. And I did a deal with Famous Music that I could bring all my bhangra clients in and record in that studio. And so that's what I did. And from 1990 to 1997, I think, or thereabouts, I was producing predominantly bhangra music.
Okay.
But the other guy at the studio was into Irish music, gentle music. He was recording bands like the Furies, Irish band.
Folk music, is it?
Yeah, yeah. And then one day in 1994, a lovely gentle spirit called Charlie Lansborough walked into the studio, and Terry and I produced an album. If we're going to be accurate about it, Terry was the producer, I was the engineer on this album. And we produced an album for Charlie Lansborough, and blow me, it went to #1 in the Irish album charts. I eventually moved on from Famous Music, but by then I'd got people interested in me as a music producer beyond the Indian thing.
Yeah.
And so I started to produce music for Irish people, country music, or Celtic things, or whatever came up, that sort of thing.
Came your way.
Though it's been years since you called, I knew right away it was you. You don't forget a voice that your heart still listens to. You're sure sounding different now that you're single again. This is the voice that loved me back then. Why, oh why did you break my heart? Why did you leave me and tear my world apart? Why did you make me think that you'd be mine right from the start? Tell me why, oh why did you break my heart?
Sometimes once in a lifetime makes up for all mistakes. Sometimes once in a lifetime is all it takes.
But you know the dream you have heartache. You know the sweet dream you tear me apart. You have a memory I can't shake. Every minute I'm awake, when you know the sweet dream you're breaking my heart. And though I feel the pain, and I must be brave, when you break my heart, I cry. I want you to know, though you let me go, if it takes forever to climb, I will this time. Met a kid one night at a local bar. Loved the way he played that rock guitar. They sat in the bed of his pickup truck, plucking them strings till the sun came up. They couldn't get enough. Those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. We'd sing and dance forever and a day. We'd live the life we choose. We'd fight and never lose, for we were young and sure to have our way.
But you become more confident. Like before, what I'm hearing, like you were kind of growing, and you kind of were collaborating. But at this stage of your life, then you decided, yeah, I'm kind of confident enough in my abilities, and I can be a producer. Is it, Peter?
Yeah, I think that's more or less right. I was 40 odd or something like that, and I'd suddenly come to the conclusion that the partnerships I'd had, and I'm not, saying anything bad about any of my partners, but that partnerships in studios and in music are not very stable. They're not very balanced, and they're easily stressed.
Yeah.
And it was only in the mid-90s that I found the inner strength to not need to feel I had partners around me and to work solo. And it was after I decided to do that everything really kicked up a gear, because then I wasn't answerable to anybody. I had no responsibility for anybody else. I could work the hours I wanted. I could work where I wanted in my own way. And everything kicked off. I carried on producing Charlie Lansbury albums, and to this day, he's
many
still around.
albums did you produce for him, Pete?
I think to date, I think it's 18.
18? Oh my God.
18, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's 18. It gets a bit fuzzed when I've done 4 songs to add to an album that was already a greatest hits album or something like that. But in that kind of order, certainly get between 200 and 250 songs, something like that.
And you produced nearly 3 albums for Larissa Tormey,
I have, yes.
So you kind of moving to Russia even now, Peter.
Well, no, I'd just like to put you on notice that you've got another 15 to do yet. In order to catch up.
I would love that. Now, hopefully it will happen anyway. So just to make people kind of more familiar with what you're doing, tell us the names of another people you were working in the Irish music. Well known.
Well, at one point I ran a bit of a record company, and we recorded Mary Duff. A lot of you will know Mary Duff as being a lady who works with Daniel O'Donnell. Now, who have I had in the studio in this last few days? Lisa Stanley. I'm doing a new single for her called Shine, which is going to be a really good single. I was working on that this morning. I've just done a thing with Ema Fox. You know Ema, does the videos. Lovely lady.
Yes.
Just done a song with her, which I finished last night. Who else have I got in the studio right now? Chappie from the north of Ireland called Anton Glackin. I'm doing 2 more songs to complete his album. I've got a Kenny Paul. Those of you know Kenny Paul, look out for him. He's again from the north. He's a ballad singer, and I'm on his 2nd album. Larissa, I like to do long-term things. My clients become my friends, which is...
Well.
I'm a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road, searching in the sun for another overload. I hear you singing in the wire, I can hear you through the wine. And the Wichita lineman is still on the line.
Oh, the summertime is coming, and the trees are sweetly blooming, and the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go?
Down by the bayou, that alligator roar, the king of the swamp, 100 years old. Dogs beat the water, your skills are dark black. Don't play by the bayou or you ain't coming back. You try and take your soul. Don't rock where the alligator roll. Don't rock where the alligator roll. Don't rock where the alligator roll.
Leave in the morning, you hold me so tight. I'm tired and I must rest my head. Church bells ring, then your eyes open wide. It must have been something I said.
Which is,
Well, yeah,
for
that's
me,
what
it's
happens
lovely.
with us, isn't it? Which is, I think
Exactly.
it's amazing, this.
So inevitably, you know, you get these long cycles. As I say, I'm still recording with Hazel. First time I recorded her was 1983. So what's that? That's 37 years ago.
Yeah,
And
much easier to work when you're own boss and you're trying to create your own circle kind of for people, isn't it? That you work with,
yeah, well,
that you feel comfortable.
yeah, I like to work with the people I like.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that makes sense. And if that makes me calm and relaxed, it makes the whole process of recording calm and relaxed, because
Exactly.
you can't be creative when you're stressed. That's
No,
well, maybe
and I
some.
mean, I think we kind of lots of people at this stage. I was talking to a few musicians, and you see even the bands now only playing for fees and stuff like that. That time when people got together to get enjoyment out of music, it's kind of lost a little bit. So I'd say by doing that, we're getting back to it. The main purpose of this, to enjoy it, isn't it, of music? Like, it has to be.
Absolutely. If you cut away all of the technology in the middle, the idea of music is that you have an idea and you want to send that idea in a kind of a telepathic manner to a listener at the other end, so that if
Absolutely
you want to
agree.
make them cry, you make them cry. If you want to make them dance, you make them dance.
Yeah,
So it's all about that. All of the technology in the middle is there to trip you up. But
that's
the most important thing is that music is an entertainment, and if you want to make if you want people to have fun, the easiest way to transmit that is to have fun in the studio.
it is very.
So if you're happy in the studio, then you'll create a sense of happiness
People
at
sense
the other
it,
end.
isn't it, Pete? People do sense us.
Completely, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that as well. That we can, and by making the music, we kind of transmitting energies. We're making people feel better, and that's like, it's very important. People can't live without music. That's
No,
what
I have to love what I'm doing. I find it really difficult to make music if I'm not in the right mood. So being in the right mood is critical. If you are in the right mood and you're loving what you're doing, I'm completely convinced that people hear that at the other end.
Me too.
At least I
Me
hope
too.
so. It seems to be the case.
I just a little bit bringing you away. Like, I know you for a few years now. I know your personality. You have very unusual mix in yourself between being artistic person, at the same time technical person. Very kind of systematic, aren't you? Like, that was engineer in you. That when you went from piano to want to study engineering. So just a few things I want to know, because I know you have amazing hobby in there. There's something to do with the robots. I want you to talk a little bit about it, because you're so versatile. Tell us just a little bit about this, what you're doing.
Okay, well, it stems from my twin interests when I was a boy, that I mentioned physics and music as being two apparently different things. I don't see them as different. I see them as a way of looking at the world, and you look at the world either in form or function. So I find the harmonic structure is just the same as the structure of a bridge to me. I don't have that dividing wall in my head which says I shouldn't link the two.
You're right.
So,
there's a harmony in the bridge in all this, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a harmony in engineering work, and there's a harmony in music, and there's a construction in music and the way you put an arrangement together, which has to be as systematic as building a bridge, in my mind. So yes, I've got these twin things. Now, over the last 40 odd years, I've been pursuing my music business, but always been interested in, I like fixing cars and mending washing machines and whatever I can find to fix. I like puzzles and problems. And this is obviously passed on into the next generation because our son, Ellis, at 15, became very interested in fighting robots. Many of you will have come across Robot Wars, the TV show.
Okay.
And making a long story short, Ellis developed a fantastic mechanical skill, way beyond anything I could achieve. And eventually we went on Robot Wars and became a team on Robot Wars. So again, I didn't have a problem with this, the fact that I was a musician in the daytime and helping build robots perhaps in the evening. And so he's been fighting robots and we've been fighting robots for the last 7 or 8 years.
7 or 8 years that's going on, is it?
Yeah, something like that. And now here's an irony. As Ellis has moved on from a teenager to an adult, he now has his own job and his own life and everything else. I stayed friendly with one of the companies that was involved in robot fighting at that time. And over the recent years, I've been doing engineering work for them.
Isn't that
it's a sideline.
Yeah.
And it's because it's nice to scratch that itch as well as the music business itch. I'm mercurial. I get bored very quickly. So if I'm doing the same thing for too long, I get stale. So I do my music, which is my mainstay, and then every now and again I go off and I do some engineering, which is in the form of kinetic
It's
art.
absolutely amazing what you're just saying, Pete, because I'm very much like that myself too. You know me, I don't like to stay in the same style of music. And like, I remember when I moved to Ireland, suddenly I am a farmer's wife. And I have to be involved into, you know, butcher shop, farming. And I said, I don't want to do that. I'm a musician. And then when I started to do that, I realized it's actually good. It's kind of exercising your brain in completely different areas and make you better back to music, isn't it?
And it's formative for you. It makes you the person you are. We are the sum of our experiences, aren't we, really? So if you've experienced, as I know you did, life in Russia on television and in nightclubs, and I think you did some translation and that sort of thing.
I did, yeah.
And then suddenly and I know you didn't speak any English back then, but what I've always found absolutely remarkable about you is that you came to Ireland 15, 20 years ago, not speaking any English.
19 this year.
Yeah. And that story is fantastic. We actually wrote a song about it, didn't we? Or we rewrote a lyric about it.
We did. Country Girl. Thank God I'm a country girl. We wrote lyrics together, Pete, with you. And I was actually only looking at my profile on iTunes yesterday, right? And this song is the most popular for downloads. And, you know, Shazam, when they kind of looking for who's singing this song. So amazingly, obviously, people find that very interesting.
Well, it's just nice because the original song kind of gave us an opportunity to remake it to fit you, which struck me as being a really nice round way of doing things. You know?
Life on the farm is kinda laid back, and nothing old country girl she can pack. Early to rise and early in the sack. Thank God I'm a country girl. Got stars in my eyes and moved to the city. Moscow was cold but exciting and pretty. I wasn't made for the glamorous life. I guess I'm a country girl. I want to be a man who plays the old fiddle. When the sun comes up I cook cakes on the griddle. Life ain't nothing but a funny, funny riddle. Thank God I'm a country girl. Who took my eye like a couple of birds. We flew up in the sky, landed on a farm in a town full of charm. And now I'm an Irish girl. I got me a man who plays the old fiddle. When the sun comes up I cook cakes on the griddle. Life ain't nothing but a funny, funny riddle. Thank God he's a country boy. beautiful she can't hide. Early to rise and turn in the sun. Thank God I'm a country girl. And I love my man who plays the old fiddle. When the sun comes up I cook cakes on the griddle. Life ain't nothing but a funny, funny riddle. Thank God I'm a country girl. And I love my man who plays the old fiddle. When the sun comes up I cook cakes on the griddle. Cause life ain't nothing but a funny, funny riddle. Thank God I'm a country girl.
But it's just in that kind of time is a little bit difficult for many people now, and I want to just stress that how important it is sometimes to go with the flow. Like your story of your life really shows that, well, like let's look at the opportunities. Don't resist. Lots of people, no, I'm not this one. I'm not going to do it because I'm not engineer, not musician. Just sometimes maybe you have to go with the flow and try things, and your life will be much richer, isn't it?
I think you're exactly right. I think that it's very easy to fall into a trap of thinking, I wish I was like this person, or I wish I did that. I think it's really critical to find your own path, find your own strengths. And if it makes no sense to anybody else, I don't think that matters. It made no sense to me that I was into physics and into music until I realized that I didn't have a problem with that. Everybody else, the educators back then, had a serious problem with it. You know, what on earth are you doing taking A-levels music and physics? You can't use those together. But now I'm old enough to believe that I had the right of it, and they were unable to understand how my mind worked. And I think everybody's their own best judge. If you've got a passion for something, go chase it.
Just go for that. Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
Pete, it was really, really fabulous to talk to you and ask you about all that thing. I'm sure people will really enjoy our interviews because it's kind of life story. It's very emotional as well. They will connect with what we were talking about. Thank you very much for your time, Pete. And I'm looking forward to work more with you for another.
Okay. Well, it's been lovely to talk to you, Larissa. Thanks for the interview, and say hi to everybody. Take care in these dangerous times, and follow your passions.
Bye-bye.
If you would like to be considered as a guest of my show, if you work in music industry, and if you have an interesting story to share with my viewers, please get in touch via my Facebook page, Larissa Tormey, or my website, www.larissatormey.com. I'll see you very soon.